Pleased to be in our performance studio with a sitar player and musicology scholar, Allyn Miner. Allyn, welcome.
Thank you. What a pleasure to be here.
I think it's the first time I've ever done an interview sitting on the floor. So just to set the stage for our listeners, we are seated on a beautiful rug, and you have brought your sitar, your instrument, with you, and you are a scholar of North Indian classical music, as well as Sanskrit. I know our listeners would love to hear the beautiful sound of your instrument and also your music. Could you tell us what you're going to play first?
Certainly. So I'm going to play rags, which are the classical melodies of India, both north and south. I'm going to play North Indian classical rag. And rags in North India are set to time of day.
Okay. Or
season. So I've chosen to play some noontime rags today. I'm going to start out with a rag called Gaudsarang, and Sarang is a family of noontime rags. Gaur means originated from the region of Bengal, probably. So a rag is a set of notes. There are 12 half steps to the classical Indian scale, and a rag uses only certain notes among them, and certain phrasings, and certain resting notes. I'm going to play the scale of this rag for you. It's considered a zigzag rag. Its scale up and down goes like this. That's actually the scale. I'm going to play a short piece called an alap, which is a flowing, non-composed section that introduces a rag. Alap means conversation, and it's the rag telling you about itself. It starts around the tonic note, and it builds up the scale, showing you the ins and outs of this rag called Gaudsarang. It starts out slow, and it moves into a little medium-paced section.
Oh my gosh, that was wonderful. So alive. We're listening to sitar player and scholar Allyn Miner. She's here in the WRTI Performance Studio with us. It was so interesting the way that started out kind of slow and meditative and then just kept building and became so alive. Could you explain for us how you make that sound on your instrument and describe the instrument?
Sure. So first of all, I have to say that a rag is very flexible, and ideally they say, well, if you play a rag successfully, the rag stands up and dances for you,
Okay.
or stands up and sings. So you can play slow, medium, and fast. The sounds of the sitar, distinctive, ringing, echoey sound, is partly due to the sympathetic strings, 13 of them, which run under the frets.
Mm-hmm.
The frets are raised and rounded, and the main 7 strings on top of the frets are used for the melody and the drone. And the sympathetics, once you tune them properly only to the notes that are going to be used in the rag, then they ring out by themselves.
And that sort of, I mean, the way that you get that note when you pull the string, that's fascinating.
That's right. That's the other distinctive sound of the sitar, the pulling 4 to 5 notes from every fret position by pulling along the length of the fret. That's all on one fret position. So that's the special sound of the sitar, 5-note pull on every note. So it's a choice of playing on the fret or playing by pulls.
So you can actually create a melody simply by pulling the string.
That's right. It's a big part of sitar playing is to play not just straight on the fret, but halfway along the length of the fret by pulling.
Well, your sitar is so interesting to look at. It, this sort of bulbous part at the end. Could you tell me what that's made out of?
That's a gourd. Sitars are made of gourds, grown specially for musical instruments. Other instruments, also stringed instruments, use gourds, and a very symmetrical gourd, and cut vertically through the stem area. And the rest of the sitar traditionally is made of Indian rosewood, rosewood face, and a hollow neck, and a bridge made of either bone or ebony wood with a flat top, which helps create a certain sustain and sound. Metal frets and metal strings, 20 strings in total. So yes, the gourd, and it's quite lighter than it actually looks.
It looks very imposing. I wonder if there are gourd farms in India.
There are gourd farms, especially for musical instruments. Yes, there are.
And I think you mentioned that the sitar actually was part of family life in India, that people often have a sitar in their homes to play, pick up and play music.
Yes, sitars were, in North India, sitars were a very popular instrument in the late 19th and especially the early 20th century. And they were so common and actually easy to play because they had frets, and they didn't have to necessarily have all these sympathetic strings. So a very approachable amateur instrument, and every urban, usually in urban households, often had sitars, which the girls and the boys of the family were learned to play both songs, popular songs, and also some classical music. So it was really it was the way perhaps guitars are in many households today.
Well, I have to ask you, you're a girl who grew up in Philadelphia. You were born and raised here, I believe. What drew you to the sitar when you were just a girl?
Well, that's a great question. It happens that back in the 1960s, my mother and her friends said, "Oh, the great Ravi Shankar is coming to perform at the Academy of Music. Should we go?" So they took me. I must have been about 12 years old, or 11 or 12, and I went and heard this music. I grew up playing the violin here in the school system, in orchestras, and so I was interested in stringed instruments. So I heard Ravi Shankar. I actually heard him twice when I was just in junior high school or so. So then when I went to college, I found someone who was offering lessons, and I thought, why not?
Oh, you must have been so mesmerized by this music because you actually went to India and studied for 10 years. You learned Hindi, you told me, you became fluent, and then you met Ravi Shankar as well. Tell us about that.
I did. It was a great privilege to go to India. I went on a junior year abroad program from the University of Wisconsin, and studied sitar there with a wonderful teacher there who I studied with for about 10 years. And while I was studying there, Ravi Shankar came to town. He was born in that city, the city of what we used to call Benares, known as Varanasi, with its formal name. He was born there. He was visiting town, and students were gathered around talking to him, and he spotted me as the only Westerner in that group, and he said, "You come out and play for me at my house."
Oh my gosh.
So my teacher went with me, and a tabla player went with me, and of course it's burned into my memory.
What an experience that must have been.
It was, and such a gracious person. He would always remembered me, and of course anybody else. He seemed to have a wonderful mind for remembering people. So he used to remember me and my name, and I met him a few times.
Oh my gosh. You just mentioned tabla player. I know that you're going to play another rag for us, and you actually have a modern tabla player with you in the form of your app on your iPhone. So tell us what you're going to play next.
So I'm going to play another rag of the noontime. It's another of the sarang family. And this is perhaps the most famous of all the sarang rags. It's called Brindavani sarang. The sarang rag from the city of Brindavan. Brindavan is famous in North India for being the homeland, the home of the Lord Krishna.
Okay.
So it's a devotional center, but Brindavan is a very well-known area. And we think that some rags must have come from folk songs.
Okay.
And then were formalized into rags. It's a very famous rag. Here's the ascent and descent of this rag. So it has a much simpler structure than the other rag. And the special phrases of this rag that always recur over and over again, by which people recognize which rag it is, might sound like this. They say that certain rags, if you play a phrase just right, it'll evoke that time of day.
Great.
So I've chosen a very brief introduction, and then I've chosen on my tabla a middle speed 12-beat cycle called Ektal. Excuse me while I turn on my speaker here.
Okay, your modern tabla player.
My modern tabla player.
And it's letting us know it's working. Okay. How fantastic. I love the way you went against the beat in part of that rag.
That's right.
So interesting. The sitar has an almost meditative quality where it just pulls you into the sound. And I understand that this kind of music, the North Indian classical music, has some of its roots in sacred texts, sacred Sanskrit texts. Is that correct?
Well, India and South Asian subcontinent is deeply spiritual. It has a long history of various religions and spiritual and philosophical practices, so separating it out from culture, it's all mixed into culture and language. So every musician has their own spiritual draw in the music, and musicians typically will always say that music comes from a higher power. So whether it's a Hindu sacred text or an Islamic devotional, mystical, spiritual motivation, or many of the other religions that are practiced in India, people bring a spiritual approach definitely to this music.
One person who was very much moved by, I think, the spiritual aspect of this music was George Harrison of the Beatles, and he also met Ravi Shankar. And tell me a little bit about what that led to.
Oh, wow, yeah. So people of my generation, many of them heard sitar and heard about Ravi Shankar for the first time through the wonderful work of the Beatles. Ravi Shankar, as a matter of fact, was known in the popular circles through the Beatles, and in classical music circles through Yehudi Menuhin, the violin player. But anyway, many people of my generation first heard sitar because of the Beatles.
And that was in the late 60s? Is that 1960s or so?
Mid-60s, I believe.
Mid-60s, okay.
All the way through the 60s, and that's right. So, yes, and George, of course, famously went and took lessons from Ravi Shankar. And Ravi Shankar saw that he was a very sincere, and he saw over time, he was quick, of course, he saw over time that sitar would take a very long apprenticeship to master it. So he did a very good job, though, in bringing it to the world of young people.
Yes, I believe he produced a couple of records. One was Chants of India with Ravi Shankar, and then one with your teacher, Ali Akbar Khan, with Ravi Shankar, live concert, I believe, from 1972.
A wonderful classic recording, fantastic recording. Ravi Shankar studied with the father of Ali Akbar Khan. They both studied together, Ali Akbar Khan and Ravi Shankar, great legends of instrumental music, studied together with Ali Akbar Khan's father. And he had just passed away at this time when they played this live concert, and they performed a rag that he had created. Rags are also created by individuals, and so the intensity and the beauty of that recording is really, really unmatched. And the two great musicians, Ali Akbar Khan and Ravi Shankar, played together duets over quite a long period of 10 years or so, as well as having their own, of course, solo careers.
Well, I should mention that Chants of India and this live concert from 1972 have just been re-released by George Harrison's family and estate. So do you think that's a good thing, that this music that's so personal to India and has kind of a sacred background, do you think it's a good thing that it's being released in the wider, more popular circles?
Well, I think everybody who performs or loves this music knows that it's very accessible. First of all, it's immediately likable to everybody who listens, and because it's a classical music, it's the art, it's the aesthetics, and the deep motivations behind it. Everybody is happy, I think, that people recognize and love Indian music. I would say that they would be happy if the idea of rag, this wonderful gift of India to the world of melody, if rags could be, understood and appreciated throughout the world. Yes, I think most musicians would say it's a wonderful thing.
I just wanted to mention one quote from a live interview with George Harrison that we talked about, where George Harrison said, it's supposedly you're supposed to pray to do the music, but it's actually as the music is happening, that is the prayer. Is that true for you?
Oh, yes, I think every musician will bring their own sense of spirituality and dedication beyond the sort of human endeavor to this music. And whether you come from a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian or other religious, any other kind of background, I think it's a higher power that you feel when you're practicing this music.
Oh, that's very moving. We would love to hear one more rag from you, Allyn. Tell us what you're going to play.
Certainly. So I've chosen to play a springtime rag called Raga Gaudsarang, and I chose it because it's a lyrical style based on which a lot of songs are based. Raga Gaudsarang is played in the springtime. I think this will summer will also do.
Okay.
I'm going to take one moment to change a couple of my sympathetic strings to the notes of this rag. So Raga Gaudsarang.
Okay.
You'll probably hear a lyrical song-like quality to it, I hope. I think I'll play it without the tabla.
Okay.
That was an alap and a little bit of a composed part. People who know this music will recognize bits of song, both devotional songs and classical songs in those phrases.
Oh, thank you. And I just see the joy on your face as you play. It was such a wonderful experience to have you here and share the gift of your music, Allyn.
Thank you, Deborah. It was a pleasure to be here.
Back to you, Jack.